Hey Chaz, so I've already watched your speech once, but what I'm going to do right now is watch it again while I'm recording myself watching it so that I can give you some live feedback at certain points within the speech so you see exactly what I'm talking about. But before I do that, I just want to say your speech is amazing. Even if all you did was duplicate this video and give the speech the exact same way again, you would totally knock it out of the park. Now, that being said, obviously, we're speakers, right? So we still want feedback on tweaks and adjustments that we can make. So I'm going to give you that feedback. But again, take what you want, disregard what you don't. Just know that it's feedback. And even if you don't implement any of it, your speech is amazing. So yay, I'm so excited for you. All right, let me flip my screen so that I can do the picture-in-picture for you. All right, here we go.
What if many of our greatest minds who have a...
Did you see it? Did you see what I just saw? Licking your lips is something that now pay a little bit of attention. You're going to see it quite frequently throughout your takes. One thing that you can do that can help with that is actually just layer on chapstick or some sort of moisturizing balm on your lips before you speak. Obviously, a 15-minute, 18-minute speech can really dry your mouth out. And if you're already doing that at the very get-go, you're going to be doing it more and more as you keep going. So get yourself some really moisturizing lip balm. Just make sure it's not tinted. Red lip gloss isn't a good look for you. And then that should help with that piece of it. But let's keep going.
A unique superpower for linchpin innovations, spanning many fields, are today wasting away behind bars. And what if, worse, one of the...
I want to throw something out that is really just more stylistic. It's just personal choice and you can see what you think and if it fits you. But when you get to these what ifs, what if you took a more pondering posture? So, when somebody's really truly thinking, they're like, what if? Right? So is there a different stance, a different posture, a different way that you can use your gestures that really bring the depth of pondering into how you're using your hands? Something you might want to just play with and see if it fits for you.
The main culprits were our very schools, who are today ignoring the science of reading and therefore preparing the next generation of children with this unique superpower.
I love what you did there in terms of the way that you leveraged your hands to sort of create a foundation down around your chest, but then you pointed your head to sort of elevate the thought and get them to think about, we're talking about children's brains. Sent a really strong subliminal message. I don't know if that was your purposeful intent, but that is absolutely what it does. So great use of hand gestures. And by the way, I can totally tell that you have been working on them. So it's just amazing. Like I said, the speech is incredible. Let's keep going.
For a life of shame and incarceration. I'm here to speak to you about dyslexia, literacy, and how brilliant children become incarcerated. Let us begin with the words of Dr. Maya Angelou, who said the elimination of illiteracy is as serious to our history as the abolition of slavery. Many years ago, while living in...
Your little pause there with the added, that is beautiful. Plus, it's a really good way to leave some space for other people to ponder and then to affirm their thoughts. Brilliant.
Thailand, I heard the most beautiful proverb that said, a heart can only be one with another heart. And I offer mine. My courage was not truly measured by the intense confusion and rage I had when a grown man burned his cigarette on my knee when I was just 6 years old. My courage was not truly measured the day that I had to throw a butcher knife at my mother's boyfriend to protect her from being hurt by him. Mm-mm. The day by which all days would test my bravery was a day in first grade, when my teacher, Mrs. Wilson, with her red bouffant hair and freckles dotted across her cheeks, told us to get out of.
I think you could actually add a little bit more to the bouffant hair. Like you have a really gentle motion up towards your head, but bouffant feels bigger. So it could even be the sort of thing where you actually use both hands to give the visual image, just something to consider. And then it becomes natural to bring both hands down to sort of create the freckles before you go back to this strong heart-centered position that you naturally keep your hands in.
A piece of paper and write 1 to 10 to prepare for a spelling test. For starters, not clearly understanding her directions, I numbered my paper laterally as opposed to horizontally, as one would do to prepare for a spelling test. My numbers and my letters all very backwards. Two common features of dyslexia. But my teacher, Mrs. Wilson, was not trained to see it, and when she began to walk around and check all of our work, she finally approached me, and she looked at my paper. And with a tone of disgust and a scowl on her face that I can still see in my mind today, our eyes met, and she said, "Are you stupid? Not another one of you." And Mrs. Wilson's words came true. I couldn't learn to read as the other kids, no matter how hard I tried. Year after year after year, even in special education classrooms. So it continues in our schools.
Hopefully you're seeing the number of times that you lick your lips. Again, totally natural, but definitely try giving the speech and recording yourself again with some sort of moisturizing lip balm on, because I think it'll really help.
With our dyslexic children who go unscreened and undiagnosed, therefore never receiving even the possibility of proper reading remediation. Brene Brown says that stories are just data with a soul. About 1 in 5 of us have dyslexia. We're certainly not all the same, but it is a neurobiological difference of the brain that makes reading and other areas of learning very difficult. It doesn't go away, and it is not corrected by classes. But the real tragedy here, the real story, is that 65% of us never graduate high school. And half of the youth.
I wonder if that should say 65% of those of us with dyslexia. Because the way that it has come across both times that I've listened to it, you're speaking to the audience, right? So you're saying 65% of us, which makes it sound like us. I wonder if you should just add the words of those of us with dyslexia. Just something to consider.
The drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs have dyslexia. And 60%, and some research shows that it could be up to 70% of youth in corrections have dyslexia. Now we know where too many of these children end up. A study out of Texas revealed that 80% of their whole prison population were functionally illiterate. And they screened one prison in particular just for dyslexia and found that nearly half of the whole prison had it. Now, is that a fluke? Or would we find similar numbers to all those incarcerated? Is there any doubt as to why the vast majority of suicide notes have dyslexic type spellings on them? The data's compelling.
I like what you did there in terms of the hand motion to really illustrate the lettering through the suicide notes. It's just a really good way, again, to anchor the visualization to the words. So super strong on that. Awesome job.
The first benchmark of intelligence is reading. And when that place becomes a place of systemic despair, the emotional consequences are often a lifetime of shame. So when we speak about dyslexia, what we're really speaking about is shame.
So right here, for some reason, we're about 4.5 minutes in, your pace starts to change. And when you first asked me to look at the pace, when I started watching it, I was like, oh my God, the pace is great. You're doing a phenomenal job. At this point, it starts to speed up. I don't know if you were maybe more conscious of it at the beginning, and then you get into the flow of the speech and you're less conscious of it. But what happens with your speed and your pace is that some of the concepts, and I'll point these out as we go, some of the concepts don't have enough space and time to actually hit the heart, right? We can't process them because you're moving on to the next thing too quickly. And then some of the others, your words are running into each other, so it's more an issue of enunciation. So be mindful of that as well. Let's keep going.
Gershon Kaufman said it best. He said that people who cannot read or have a difficulty learning how to read, they experience the same levels of shame as those who've engaged in incest. But allow me to frame it in a different way. I was about 9. My father bought a brand new computer and a small desk. And as soon as it was all set up, he said, do not play by that computer. As he headed to work the next day, I walked straight into the computer room to play on that fun new spinning chair.
What if you actually walked? Like hand movements. I walked straight into that room because you're telling a different story. And so articulating your movements in a way that's more in alignment with that story versus the way that you're giving the speech might actually add a little bit more context to it, a little bit more depth. Again, a lot of these are stylistic. Take what you want, throw away what you don't. But simulating, I walked right in, might be a better way to add that depth to that part.
And of course, when I was playing and spinning in the moment,
Again, playing and spinning, moving that chair round and round. So how can you simulate that so that you're telling a story with your hands, right? Kind of like when we use different voices for different characters. You're going to do the same thing with your hands just to show that you're almost more back into who you were as a kid, right? You're telling the story with your hands, you're spinning. Again, stylistic, but just something that you can think about if you want to add to it.
Would result in me falling on the desk and the monitor and it came crashing down the floor. So fast.
And it came crashing down. So I would add a little more emphasis there too, just to hook people into that story.
Fast forward the rest of the day, my dad comes home from work. He walks straight into the computer room and I'm sitting on an old, ugly brown couch with clammy hands, waiting to get it. Now, whoever raised you might have had a special name for you. Your name is Susan, but perhaps your name is, she called.
So a little space there could be good. So I was sitting on the couch with clammy hands. Give a little gap. And then go into whoever it is that raised you. Because that feeling of nervousness that everybody gets anchored back to thinking about when their parent is going to come home and they are going to get in trouble, you move so quickly beyond that people don't get to experience that part of the emotion. But that really anchors people into your story. So give a little bit more space for that, for people to feel it, and then move into the nickname.
Called you sweetie. My dad used to call me kiddo. And he walks out of the computer room, coming back home from work, and he's standing right in front of me, and I'm wincing my face, waiting to get it. And do you know what my dad did to me? He picked me up and held me tight and said, don't worry about it, kiddo. I can get another computer. Now, what does that story have to do with dyslexia?
Again, a little tiny bit more space there. Don't worry about it, kiddo. I can get another computer. And then let that sit. Because again, that's really powerful. That's where everybody is thinking that your dad's about to whoop your ass, right? And then instead, here you throw out this reaction that is the exact opposite of what people expect. So give them a minute to process that before you move on.
Absolutely everything. What is proven by the shame researchers, you know intuitively perhaps. You cannot reach any potential in hiding. It's a safe space or a grace in real time, plus bravery that removes shame. And our current school systems have set and are sending millions, yes, millions of our children into a lifetime of shame and hiding by not teaching them to read the way they learn. This epidemic is a mass production of non-readers and low achievers. And the economics data reveal the filthy truth. That is that we are more willing to spend money to put illiterate Americans in prison than we are on teaching children to read the way they learn. And what is most disturbing of all of this is that for many, many decades, there has been research-based curriculum that can move almost all dyslexic children forward in their reading.
The way that you move your hand there to show, like to simulate the moving forward, super great use of hand movements. That's awesome. Look at, you're doing it again with your lips though.
But schools refuse to use it due to old or outdated policies, or in many cases do not implement the new laws and new policies. And with little to no mandatory training on dyslexia in the teacher accreditation process, who can blame?
So I don't know if you heard it there, that's one of those points where you start speeding up in the pace of your speech. And so the enunciation was depleted a little bit. So be mindful of that.
The teachers. You see, what emerges isn't that children are suffering from dyslexia. It's that teachers are suffering from dysteachia, as a leader in the field likes to put it. And there are expensive private learning centers that have a virtual 100% success rate in remediating children with dyslexia using a multisensory-based system.
That needs to be slowed down, because the fact that there are solutions that show a 100% success rate is something that you want to highlight, not blast through. So definitely slow that piece down.
These systems must be made accessible and used in the public schools immediately. Children are suffering while adults are fumbling and deciding what to do.
Such a great use of fumbling. You could even accentuate that a little bit more, showing the clumsiness of your hands. Again, just brings the words into more of a visual image that connects with the audience, which obviously is so important since you're not there live in front of them. Over-articulating gestures because of the fact that you are on camera becomes a little bit more important than if you were there live.
And we should not be shocked to find that among our Black and Hispanic communities, children with learning disabilities experience much higher rates of school disciplinary action and higher rates of school dropout.
I'm sure you heard it. It just happened there again where the enunciation gets lost because of the speed. Only pointing it out so that you're mindful of it, that's all. I think at this point you probably will be, but just so that I am doing a good job and providing good feedback for you, I just wanted you to kind of hear that one as well.
Who in our society suffers from extreme disproportionate incarceration rates? You know the answer. There's simply a deep relationship to getting your child's reading needs met and their income. Maybe this is why.
What about like the scales of balance there so that you can show the correlation? You know, talk about there's simply a connection between their reading ability and their income. So that instead of it being waist level and you're just talking and giving your speech, you're actually visually representing how those two balance each other out. Again, stylistic, food for thought.
Why George Bush the First said that reading is the new civil right, because if you cannot read, you cannot be educated. And if you cannot be educated, you will not succeed. How many schools are really prepping kids for a lifetime of shame, crime, and yes, incarceration by not teaching them to read the way they learn? Reading is the new civil right, and dyslexia needs to become intertwined with our national conversations on race, inequality, in the school-to-prison pipeline.
You're intertwined. Awesome. That's really good.
And what's so peculiar is that schools screen for hearing problems. They screen for vision problems. They even screen for lice, but they do not screen for dyslexia.
Give space there. They even screen for lice, but they don't screen for dyslexia. So give a little bit more space between the lice and the dyslexia because the comparison is really, really big. Instead of patting your head, maybe point to your head so it's a little bit more visual. Again, maybe both hands. And then, yeah, it's awesome. It's amazing. Oh, and maybe drop the depth and breadth of your voice a little bit when you go into, but they do not screen for dyslexia. Make that a point where people have to lean in to really hear the brevity of what you're saying.
An issue that affects about 1 in 5 kids. How many children have been passed through the system, unscreened, undiagnosed, passed as behaviorally untreatable, believing they are not smart, unfit for a dream? When one of the main things that's not smart in this equation are the policies on dyslexia that are in place. And any teacher or parent or policy that would suggest that dyslexia is only a weakness. Maybe the seedbed of the problem is within our very beliefs, because dyslexia can be a superpower. Now, when you see me, do you see a man with a disability, or a man with originality, or perhaps a man with a superpower? A study.
This, again, is just going to be a matter of personal choice. But what if, and hopefully you can see me, what if you said, is it a superpower? And gave yourself a power pose so that, now my chair won't slide, so that the audience can really see the strength in your stature when you speak of dyslexia being a superpower. A complete countenance change. Something to think about.
A study out of the UK revealed that 97% of people see dyslexia to be purely a disability, when there is no correlation to IQ. And Dr. Sally Shaywitz, a leader in the field out of Yale, says that it's like an island of weakness in a sea of strengths. Let us just talk about innovation. Our wheelhouse is out of the box thinking because we ourselves were never in the box. Seeing things that neurotypicals often cannot see, noticing connections and patterns, which sometimes translates to an uncanny ability to seeing outcomes while having only partial data. I've heard several authors and researchers refer to this as fortune telling. This was the gifting of Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, Walt Disney, Michael Faraday, the scientist, who were all dyslexic. In other words, we have the genius of seeing the tree and the seed. Is that not the magic of living in unseen possibilities that we all covet?
The way that you draw your hands to your forehead and close your eyes and then open them as you're saying what we see, so beautiful. It really illustrates your point well, so keep that in there. Great job.
We are responsible for the light bulb, the movie camera, flight, the iPhone, the general theory of relativity, IKEA instruction manuals, and so much more. And of course, my favorite, though, is definitely Mickey Mouse. But that's what an empowered dyslexic can do. Now, does every single dyslexic child have the aptitude for such levels of innovation? Absolutely not. But does every single dyslexic child have immense potential for much higher levels of success than we ever even give them opportunity?
Take your hand higher there. So you're repeatedly doing this, but when you talk about, does every child have an opportunity for higher levels of success? Figure out a movement that feels natural to you, that takes it higher in a more visually representative way.
Today? Absolutely yes. Because on that same side of the coin, we are the linchpin innovators of history. And all evidence suggests that those innovators' genius were not in spite of their dyslexia, but because of it. Because dyslexia can be a superpower. Now imagine if my teacher, Mrs. Wilson, was trained and understood what dyslexia was. And when she saw my paper, she would have said, "Oh, Chaz, you're going to have to work so hard. But there's gifts and there's greatness in you." Imagine if I and the millions of other dyslexic children were exposed to our strengths as early as formal education began and were screened and diagnosed and remediated. Wow. Everything right in the world began with a single person's idea. That's why we're here. Imagine if the one who could unlock the mysteries of global warming for both sides definitively is serving a life sentence. Imagine if the one who would find a cure to cancer is sitting behind bars. Imagine if the one who would write a book that would become a talisman for millions is sitting in isolation in a cell with no pen. Each of us must tell our story to complete our journey. But what is woundedness when it begins to target certain groups over others? Do we not call that discrimination? Do we not call it oppression? But we are talking about a category of people, children no less, who are systematically told that their story doesn't matter, that their ability is a disability, and that recovery is not possible. My hope is to put a new and different image in your mind of repression, one that is affecting all of our schools.
I think maybe adjust that movement so that instead of going up to your head and then saying, my goal is to put a new image in your mind, you actually make that movement happen as you're saying that. My goal is to put a new image in your mind. So just the timing of that maneuver so that you're coordinating your hand movements with your storytelling.
Your life and the future innovations that will heal our world. This is a repression of innovators, of brilliant children incarcerated, and the tragedy of wasted talent. And the answer, one of the main answers, is so simple. We say in dyslexia all the time, that if a child cannot learn to read the way we teach, it's time we teach the child to read the way they learn. Now, I believe that all breakthroughs come through manifesting curiosity, a power that we all carry equally. And I also believe in the words of Dr. Seuss, one of the greatest promoters of childhood literacy, who said,
"You're getting a little fast there again, so just be mindful of it. You're starting to speed through getting to that quote."
unless someone like you cares an awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. And someone asked, what about me? All I can tell you is one day somebody showed me a grace in my reading. My dad would let me labor through books well below my grade level until one day, many years later, I caught up and read my first book cover to cover with true comprehension.
How about reading your book? Until that one day I caught up. I read my first book cover to cover. Again, just bringing the visualization to the storytelling.
In 7th grade, I was blessed. My dyslexic dad had the genius to see the tree and the seed. And since then, through the kindness of another mentor who also saw the tree, I've been paying it forward through public service. I spent years overseas loving the poorest of the poor, doing abolitionist work in Asia, and serving Muslim immigrants in Europe, and working in special education classrooms. But most recently, I founded a nonprofit that helps children with learning differences find new narratives about themselves. Because dyslexia can be a superpower. And my gift of innovation came how I can paint on the hearts of men, women, and children. But today, in this moment, I'm talking to you. Listen, what shame are you on the cusp of breaking out of? Don't worry about it.
I wonder if you could do that a little bit differently. Like maybe, what shame are you on the cusp of breaking out of? Like some way to represent just the way that we feel restricted when we're dealing with that shame. So maybe something like this. Yeah, I don't know, play with that a little bit, but maybe that might be a different way to bring that in with more movement that matches the story.
Kiddo, there's a tree in the seed. Thank you.
All right, my dear. Hopefully some of that feedback can be helpful. Like I said, even if you didn't implement a single change, your speech is amazing. And I think the part that I really love seeing is that these different pieces and parts that I've got to see and witness the evolution of, that we've seen you give these bite-sized nuggets, these little mini speeches that when you brought them all together, created a really wonderful TEDx speech. So congratulations. I wish we were not in a life of COVID so that I could wrap my arms around you and give you a big hug because Chaz, this is simply amazing. I cannot wait to watch where you go, and I feel so grateful that I get to see how you are touching the lives of dyslexics because fist bump, we have to have each other's backs. All right, my dear, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you for allowing me and trusting me to give you this feedback. I cannot wait to see the end product.